Kyle Busch says he's close to announcing his 2023 NASCAR plans, and 23XI has announced a number and a swap for the rest of the 2022 season. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to another video. We've got a ton of NASCAR and other motorsports stories discussed here today on the channel. Well, let's go ahead and just jump straight into those really quickly. We're going to go ahead and start off paint schemes and sponsorship news first. Let's jump those really quickly. The first paint scheme we're taking a look at is Denny Hamlin's 2022 Achromatica scheme that we're going to be seeing next week at Kansas. Solid paint scheme, in my opinion. I like the colors on it, and it's really good to see that Denny Hamlin has a new sponsor that's stepping up to sponsor him. I think it looks pretty solid, and hopefully Denny Hamlin will have a good run in this car this next weekend. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Tommy Joe Martin's 2022 Capital City Hauling scheme. They're going to be seeing this weekend at Darlington. So kind of like a little bit like a throwback to the 05 All-Star Racing when Hendrick was called All-Star Racing. It's kind of a little bit of a throwback to that. I think this looks really great in my opinion, and I'm excited to see it out on the racetrack this weekend at Darlington. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Harrison Burton's 2022 Motorcraft Quick Lane 50th Anniversary scheme. They're going to be seeing this weekend at Darlington. Overall, I think it's a pretty good looking paint scheme. Excited to see that they're kind of doing a little bit of a throwback and a vintage to the 50th anniversary. I love the teams that are doing a throwback, even though it's not a throwback weekend. I love doing a throwback paint scheme, and it looks really good, in my opinion. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Chad Fincham's 2022 Ted Russell scheme we're going to be seeing this weekend at Darlington. Basic, simple, but looks pretty good in my opinion. I love the white. I love the black contrast. I think it looks good, and I'm excited to see it on the racetrack this weekend at Darlington. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Noah Gragson's 2022 Ed Morris Automotive Group schemes we're going to be seeing at Texas and Kansas. I love these paint schemes. I love that they're so colorful. I love the colors on it. It looks really awesome, and I'm definitely looking forward to see these paint schemes on the racetrack in the upcoming races. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Ty Dillon's 2022 EG3 Technology scheme they're going to be seeing this weekend at Darlington. Kind of very similar to like his Big City Dogs teams that he's had or whatever the games he's had. I think this looks really good. It's very simple, and excited to see he has a new sponsor this weekend at Darlington. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is JJ Yeley's 2022 Parts and Plus scheme they're going to be seeing this weekend at Darlington. Honestly, I think the scheme's okay. It's not fantastic, but it's great to see that there's a new sponsor coming in to sponsor this weekend. That's exciting for sure, and hopefully JG will have a good run this weekend in the 15 car. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Ryan Vargas' 2022 Native Sons scheme that I believe we're going to be seeing this weekend at Darlington, if I'm not mistaken. Really awesome to see that Ryan Vargas has a new full sponsor on the car. I think it's exciting to see, and hopefully Ryan will have a good run in this car this weekend. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Brandon Brown's 2022 Jabs Construction scheme they're going to be seeing this weekend at Darlington. Brandon Brown, of course, will be behind the wheel of the 78 for BJ McLeod Motorsports. This looks pretty cool in my opinion. Very similar to his 68 number. The only difference, I think, is the number base of the team. Pretty exciting for sure, and hopefully Brandon Brown will have a good run in this car this weekend. And the final paint scheme we are taking a look at is Haley Deegan's 2022 Odyssey Battery scheme that we're going to be seeing next weekend at Kansas. Really awesome to see that Haley Deegan has new sponsors. One thing she never seen struggle with is finding sponsorship and funding. It's really exciting to see that she has a new sponsor. I think Blackbeard Designs or Kyle Williams or Ryan Williams designed this paint scheme. These guys have done really awesome on the paint schemes. It looks exciting, and I'm looking forward to see on the racetrack here next weekend at Kansas. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about the Darlington purse money for this weekend. So every single week, Bob Pockers tends to put out every week basically the purse money for the weekend for the Cup Series, the Xfinity Series, and the Truck Series. So for the Cup Series, it's $7,823,733. And for the Xfinity Series, it's $1,208,129. That's pretty good purse money. Of course, a lot of that money, majority of it, is going to go to the charter teams, while the unchartered teams, which I think there's maybe one of it. I don't think there's any unchartered teams, but the unchartered teams are really getting any of the money. For Xfinity, that's decent money, but not fantastic money. I've seen truck purses kind of close to that this year, but that's the purse for this weekend. I think they're decent. They're not fantastic, but those are the purses for this weekend. Honestly, they're not the best, but they're not the worst, in my opinion. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about NASCAR Productions. As according to Bob Pockers and multiple other reporters, NASCAR held a groundbreaking next to the R&D Center for a new facility for 125 employees. This includes people that work in the NASCAR Productions facility and people who work at MRN as well. One thing that happened, I believe, at this groundbreaking was about the future of the TV deals, and if this new groundbreaking facility, this 50,000 square foot facility that we've already talked about on the channel, is going to benefit a lot when it comes to the TV deal. They say that this could really impact the TV deal, so that's one thing we're going to watch. I think it's great they've got a new NASCAR productions facility that's going to be next to the R&D center. I think it's exciting. I think it's amazing, and happy to see that there's a new R&D center that's going to be at the not R&D center, new production facility. I think it's awesome, to be honest with you. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to be talking about Henderson Motorsports. As Henderson Motorsports is going to be returning to the Truck Series next weekend at Kansas with Parker Kligerman. The last time Henderson Motorsports competed in the Camping World Truck Series was the last time they actually won at Mid-Ohio, when they picked, I believe, their second victory as an organization in their history of the team. I expect team to have a lot of pace and speed. I'm not sure if they're going to be a Chevy or a Toyota back team. That's one thing that is not confirmed at this moment. But it's pretty exciting to see that Henderson Motorsports is going to be back. Pretty exciting for sure. And hopefully they'll have a really good run at Kansas. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Jamie Chadwick. As it was announced yesterday that Jamie Chadwick is going to be testing an Indy Lights car at Sebring at the conclusion of the season for Andretti Autosport. Jamie Chadwick, who's won 1 or 2 W Series championships, is looking to try to move up the ladder. That's the goal of the Women's Series. His goal is to get up the ladder in the world. It's been really hard to do that, but she has been really successful in the W Series, and she's very, very young. So she's getting an opportunity to test with Andretti Autosport. I don't think people realize how big of a deal it is that they're finally letting her have an opportunity to get behind the wheel of an Andretti Autosport car, because I know that she would love to compete in other forms of racing, including Formula One and also an Indy car as well. I think it's great that they're testing Indy Lights car for her. I wonder if she does well enough at this test. I wonder if that she is going to have an opportunity to race at Indy Lights next year, because there's some talent that's probably going to be going up. You got Linus Lundqvist, who's probably going to be promoted next up into IndyCar next year, probably with, Dale Coyne Racing. So Jamie Chadwick, I think it's exciting for sure that she's going to basically be returning and going to have an opportunity to test in IndyCar. I think it's really exciting, and hopefully she'll have a really good test. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Rick Ware Racing. As Rick Ware Racing is going to be entering another series, and they're going to be entering the NHRA this weekend for, I believe, the Gator Nationals. Clay Millican, who's been a veteran of the NHRA series, will be in that car. I think it's really great that Rick Ware Racing is competing other forms of racing. While they're kind of considered a joke in NASCAR, one thing I really love about Rick Ware Racing is that the team is able to go out and run different forms of racing. They've raced in IMSA. They've raced in the Asian Le Mans Series. They've raced in IndyCar. Currently, they race IndyCar, and they've been somewhat competitive in IndyCar. And now they've got a NASCAR team as well, and they just have been doing a lot of big things where I love what they're doing right now. I love that they're going into racing different forms. I wonder if they're going to have Clay Millican run full-time next year, because the NHRA season is kind of getting close to being over. I think their season ends in October, if I'm not mistaken. I don't pay attention to the NHRA as I do to other motorsports. But hopefully they'll have a really good opportunity. Hopefully they got a shot to go out there and win. It'd be exciting if they go up against like Tony Stewart, who's actually going to be in the broadcast booth, by the way, for the NHRA. Hopefully Rick Ware Racing can do really, really well with Clay Millican, and maybe they can surprise and win in their first start. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Mike Bumgarner. As it was announced today that Mike Bumgarner is going to become the competition director at Junior Motorsports at the conclusion of this season. Currently, L.W. Miller, who just took over from, I believe, Ryan Pemberton, he's going to be basically the competition director for the remainder of the season. And then Mike Bumgarner, who is a former crew chief and a former engineer at Junior Motorsports, will be making the jump away and going up and working in the engineering side of things. I believe that means that either Sam Mayer or Josh Berry is going to need a new crew chief at the conclusion of the season, as Mike Bumgarner has been crew chief, I believe, for Josh Berry this season. Mike Bumgarner, though, he's been very veteran presence. He's got a lot of veteran presence, and it makes a lot of sense that they've gone ahead and chosen him. A guy has been in the team for many, many years. Makes a lot of sense. I really hope that he can do good as the competition director and continue Junior Motorsports' incredible success and really good success as an organization. So I'm really excited for sure to see that he's been promoted, and hopefully he'll have an opportunity to basically go ahead and help the team continue to improve in Xfinity and contend for more championships as they've done many, many years. Of course, they won a championship in 2014. They won the championship in 2018, 2019. You name it. They've been championship contenders over time, and hopefully Mike Bumgarner will be able to help out with that. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about World of Outlaws. Now, World of Outlaws and Dirt Car Racing released a joint statement earlier today in regards to violence and abuse and all that kind of stuff. They released a statement in regards to that. I'm not really sure what's been going on. From I heard a lot of people say Kyle Loomis, who either is a driver or an official in the World of Outlaws or a race car driver in the World of Outlaws, did something really, really bad, and apparently it got really, really serious. And I haven't really been able to catch up and see the video in regards to that. But whatever Kyle Loomis did, I hope he basically is it for him. I hope he's done. I hope he's not forgiven for it. But this is something I really did not expect to see, is basically a situation where, you know, someone got in a lot of trouble. But it's not a surprise when you do things that are really, really bad. You are going to get in a lot of trouble. So whatever he did, I hope he's punished for it. And honestly, this kind of a surprise the statement came out. But if you got a situation like this, it's something that needs to be addressed. And I'm glad that they've gone ahead and addressed this situation head on. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Joey Logano. Now, Joey Logano, of course, every Tuesday does a show behind the wheel on Sirius XM. I think Mike Bagley and Pete Passon are associated with that, if I'm not mistaken. But he usually does this every Tuesday. And on his show, he talked about the nature of the current conditions of super speedway racing, where there's a lot of wrecks, there's a lot of chaos, and he said that that is not really the best way to drivers to be able to represent each other, and said that it's kind of frustrating in what they're achieving with all these crazy running orders at super speedways near the end, and a lot of cars taken out as well. I'm going to say this about super speedway racing myself. I think super speedway racing has gotten way overboard when it comes to the chaos in racing. We've seen so many drivers basically crash out, and a lot of times you only have few cars. I remember back in 2014 and 2015 where you had a lot of cars had a shot to go out and win races. Ever since really around 2017 and 2018 when they introduced stages, I think the aggression really has picked up as of recently. So I think that's why super speedway racing has gotten as crazy as it is. And this is a guy, by the way, that is extremely aggressive. So Joey Logano, when he's talking about it, and he's a little bit older of a driver as well, being 32 years old, I can really understand the frustration, especially with the next-gen safety, which we're going to be talking about that here in a later portion of this episode. But I understand Joey Logano's frustration around super speedway racing, and I think the drivers could probably calm down just a little bit when it comes to aggression. But I don't think it's something you're going to see calm. I just think drivers are only going to continue to get more and more aggressive over time. And I think that's because also these younger drivers, a lot of them coming up, even some guys in Cup now, like Ty Gibbs, they are under the age of when Dale Sr. passed in 2001. So I wonder if we'll ever see it change. But honestly, I don't expect the nature of the change, especially with how NASCAR's been going recently. I don't expect NASCAR to change the policies really in regards to super speedway racing to calm it down. It's going to continue to get more and more aggressive, in my opinion. And I think it's going to get crazier and crazier. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Chase Elliott. As Chase Elliott was being interviewed at the NASCAR Playoffs Media Day for all the drivers who are currently in the playoffs. And Chase Elliott was being asked about the short track racing. He was one of the people that has really been prominent about the short track racing. And in their interview that Noah Lewis basically got with multiple media members, Chase Elliott says that National Fairgrounds could be the best stop on the NASCAR schedule if NASCAR is able to return. This is a really interesting quote, but I could really agree with him. NASCAR currently at the moment right now is trying to get the National Fairgrounds back on the NASCAR Cup Series schedule. And remember, last year Chase Elliott competed in the SRX race that was at the National Fairgrounds. And not only did it sell out, but there was such an electric crowd. And Chase Elliott has basically been really kind of critical of National Super Speedway. And he says that we need to have more races kind of closer to city or in the city and bring the product in. The National Fairgrounds is like one of the only few tracks that's really inside the city. Yes, you have the LA Coliseum, but the LA Coliseum is temporary. The National Fairgrounds is the National Fairgrounds. It's a short track. It's been always known as a racetrack, not like the LA Coliseum. So Chase Elliott's absolutely on point here too. That I think the energy would be incredible, especially I know that they're still having issues trying to get it through. But I hope one day they're able to have it. And I think Chase Elliott's right. I think that if they can get the National Fairgrounds back, I think it will produce some of the best. I think it will produce such a great atmosphere, such a great crowd. It will bring ticket racing, and I think you could have both the National Super Speedway and the National Fairgrounds be on the same schedule as well. So to me, I think it's really exciting for sure. I understand what Chase Elliott is saying here, and honestly, I hope that the National Fairgrounds gets on the schedule in the future. We just got to wait for some things to go through in regards to that. But I will say this when it comes to the National Fairgrounds situation. I agree with Chase Elliott. They need to get the National Fairgrounds on the schedule in the near future, in my opinion. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Jeremy Clements Racing. We talked about this on the channel a couple days ago that I believe on Wednesday or Tuesday evening that Jeremy Clements Racing was handed major penalties. They were handed an L2 penalty, loss of 75 in owner points and driver points. The crew chief, Mark Zetzer, was fined $60,000. The big reason being the intake manifold. Well, we got an update yesterday, and they are going to go ahead and appeal those penalties that they received on Tuesday. They had until Friday, when you're watching this today, to basically go ahead and appeal it. Well, they are going to go ahead and appeal the penalties. The reason that they are going to be appealing these penalties is basically because of the fact that they said the intake manifold was too short, but they said it really wasn't going to give them a competitive advantage. Now, it is in the rulebook that you're not supposed to mess with any sort of the parts in the engine. Putting a part K in the rulebook, if I'm not mistaken. If you mess with anything like the intake manifold, you're going to get in a lot of trouble. And what they're trying to do here is they're trying to appeal the penalties because that is a massive penalty. And what I think they're trying to do is they're trying to get all their penalty rescinded. Where that is basic, because remember, they actually cannot use that win at Daytona. They got less past week. They cannot use that win at Daytona to get into the playoffs. To me, in my honest opinion, when it comes to the situation, I think they're going to have a hard time basically getting the penalty rescinded. NASCAR has been really strict when it comes to their penalty system. And like I said, I think it's going to be really tough for them to go ahead and win this appeal. I think it's just going to be really tough for them to win the appeal. But I can't blame them for trying because they feel like they basically are going to lose a lot of money. Will they get the penalty rescinded? I think it's possible. I could see him rescinding it to an L1 penalty, maybe loss of like 35 owners points and driver points, and maybe reduce it in half for the fine for Mark Zetzer from 60 grand to 30 grand, and they can make up some of the ground that they lost in the race. Basically, just to lose the whole entire race because when you lose 75 owner points and driver's points, that's not one race, that's not two races, that's almost 3 races that you're basically losing the points that Jeremy Clements Racing generally gets in a race. I think it's a good decision to appeal it. I think it's a great decision, but I don't expect NASCAR to basically rescind the penalties. I think, again, we'll see what happens in regards to that, but I think it's a good decision to go ahead and appeal it, but I don't really think that there's going to be any changes that come out from that. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about the damaged vehicle policy. As there's been some good news in regards to updates when it comes to the damaged vehicle policy. Drivers have been begging for upgrades in time in regards to the vehicle policy, and NASCAR announced a day or two ago that they have gone ahead and increased the number of minutes for the damaged vehicle policy from 6 minutes to 10 minutes. Like I mentioned, NASCAR playoff drivers have been begging for NASCAR to increase the time, as if we've had a lot of races here where because of all the wrecks and crashes and stuff, and with all the tollings being broken and stuff, NASCAR has increased the damage vehicle policy from 6 to 10 minutes. To me, I think this is not only an amazing change, but a great change. I don't think 6 minutes is enough because not only are you counting the time you're on pit road doing repairs, but you're counting the time in and you're counting the time out. So I think this is generally a really great decision. NASCAR has gone ahead and increased it. I think they needed to personally increase it for a very long time. I think if you're going to generally want this, this damage vehicle policy, I think the damage vehicle policy makes sense. I've been saying that they're going to keep this policy. I talk about this in the Coke 600, but I don't think 6 minutes was enough. So the fact that they are going ahead and increasing the damage vehicle policy for increasing it from 6 minutes to 10 minutes is going to give these teams a little bit more time and will keep them in the race. And with this car, the next-gen car not falling apart as much, you can fix the towing, can fix it, and get the car in much better shape so debris basically won't fall off the car as well, and you'll have a little bit more time to basically come back in. To me, I think this is not only an amazing decision, but I think it's a great decision by the team. I think it's a great decision. Honestly, I'm happy to see the NASCAR has gone ahead and updated the damage vehicle policy. I think it's a great call, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Tanner Gray. Now, a lot of us, including myself, jumped the gun on a situation a couple days ago. So there was a video that basically kind of came out on Twitter, basically showing Tanner Gray saying some things, as well, not the real Tanner Gray, but a Tanner Gray account basically saying some not so really nice things. Yesterday, or 2 days ago when you're watching this, Tanner Gray went on social media and basically wrote a statement basically going ahead and clearing his name in the iRacing incident. Steve Myers, who is basically the president and basically CEO of iRacing, went ahead and said that his name has been cleared and will not get penalized for any stretch of imagination for this incident. I'm going to say this. A lot of us jumped the gun on the situation kind of on a Twitter trend, and people kind of went off. What we need to do, we had a situation with Eddie the Hunt. We had a situation where everyone jumped the gun, like myself, on the Eddie the Hunt situation, and we all got in trouble for it. To me, I did already apologize on Twitter to Tanner Gray, and I'll publicly apologize here to Tanner Gray as well for kind of jumping the gun on the situation because I was in the wrong. I've done that multiple times, and I'll publicly admit that I was in the wrong for the situation. But I'm going to say this is like I've seen a lot of people also need to be held accountable for that situation as well. I'm happy Tanner Gray is innocent. From people I know, Tanner Gray's a good kid. I think a lot of people also kind of have a bad reputation of the Grays because Taylor's antics on the racetrack. He's had a lot of bad antics on the racetrack, which I think kind of affects his reputation just a little bit. I'm happy, though, he's been able to clear his name. I'm very happy for him, and I'm glad to see that his name has been able to clear, and there's no issues for Tanner Gray. Good to see that Tanner Gray didn't cause any issues, and I think it's good to see for sure. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to go ahead and talk about North Wilkesboro. Last night at North Wilkesboro, the energy at the track, North Wilkesboro had a major event. The Cars Late Model Tour, the Window 125 was there. And the crowd was energized because there was one big high-profile driver was there to race, and that was Dale Earnhardt Jr. According to Adam Stern, this is what he reported yesterday. He says the attempt to revive North Wilkesboro is off to a good start with around 18,000 people showing up to the race last night. He also says the track will likely be closed in 2023 for construction, and they will open up in 2024. Last night was the final paved race, as they basically will be closing the track here to basically take all of the old asphalt out, and this is going to end up becoming a dirt track. But let's go to the Cars Late Model Tour race that ended up happening. So Dale Jr. started 12th in the race and basically had one of the fastest cars. But one of the things is these, basically with the situation with the tires, you have to save your tires. I only think you get only one set throughout the race. You basically have to save your tires and save everything on your car. So Dale Jr. had a hard time passing. I think the race wasn't fantastic. I saw some of it was okay, but it wasn't fantastic. The race was generally dominated by Chad McCumphy, Carson Quaffle, and Mason Diaz. Dale Jr. and near the end of the race really started making up a ton of ground near the conclusion of the race and nearly had a shot to go out there and win, but unfortunately did not have enough time. Then a caution comes out with 3 laps to go in the race, and we set up for an overtime restart with Carson Quaffle leading, Mason Diaz in second, and Dale Jr. in third. Going into turn number 1, there was contact between Mason Diaz and Carson Quaffle. Both of them hung on. Carson Quaffle would be able to pull away, and he would hold off Mason Diaz and Dale Jr. to pick up the victory. Carson Quaffle, who is Dale Jr.'s late model driver, who generally runs the Cars Late Model Tour for Dale Jr., went on to win the race, and Dale Jr. was very happy. And for a lot of you who don't know, Carson Quaffle is the son of legendary Truck Series driver Travis Quaffle. Congratulations to Carson Quaffle on winning. Dale Jr. basically speaking to media, basically was very happy, was emotional after the race, and was really happy to see that North Wilkesboro is alive and well. I think the future of North Wilkesboro, in my personal opinion, is in a really great shape. Attendance and everything I know has been on the up. I think everything about the future of North Wilkesboro right now is just incredible. And I never thought, like when I was younger, I never thought the North Wilkesboro can come back. I thought it was all pipe dream. But I think there's a really good chance down the road that a Cup Series race could happen at the track. Now, they're going to have to work on getting the traffic concerns. Is one thing someone told me is they've got to work on the construction, the traffic, and all that stuff. And they're going to do that, and they're going to get that stuff fixed. But to me, I think it's just so exciting to see that a track like North Wilkesboro, that really for many years was sitting idle. I think it's amazing and phenomenal that track is making its glorious return to NASCAR. I think, but not NASCAR base, is glorious return. It's a shame they're not going to be racing there until October for the dirt racing. Maybe they'll get a driver like Kyle Larson. But it's just phenomenal to see how Dale Jr. come out so emotional about it. He never thought we'd come back here in person. I never thought we would either. Congratulations to all the success of North Wilkesboro so far. And I think it'll be a long time for Cup comes back, but it could happen next 2 years. Maybe they do go ahead and run maybe like an exhibition race, like the All-Star race next year. Maybe that's one of the things that's holding up the Cup schedule at this point. Who really knows? But I think the future of North Wilkesboro is in really awesome and really phenomenal shape, and I'm really excited for the future of North Wilkesboro, in my opinion. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Denny Hamlin. Now, Denny Hamlin had suffered some pretty major injuries, in the Cup Series race at Daytona. Suffered a pretty big wreck, got involved in the big one where that rain caution came out, where he's up front contending for the lead. And if you heard on his radio, he was really upset and was really in a lot of pain. Well, because of the pain that he has received, Denny Hamlin has decided to, instead of racing this weekend's Xfinity Series race, he has decided to sit out the NASCAR Xfinity Series race at Darlington due to back soreness and soreness near the head as well. Christopher Bell, who drives the 24 Joe Gibbs Racing, is going to substitute for Denny Hamlin in that car. He'll drive the 18 car that Denny Hamlin was supposed to run. So this will be the first time that Denny Hamlin, I believe, has not raced in the NASCAR Xfinity Series, I think since around 2014 or 2013. It's been a long time since Denny Hamlin raced because Denny Hamlin usually runs this race. But I think Denny Hamlin wants to be focused on basically making sure his health is in a better shape and also wants to be prepared and kind of have that mental focus for getting ready as well. I'm going to talk about this next-gen safety, but man, we first have had Kurt Busch's situation where he's sitting out pretty much for the rest of the season, it looked like at this point, and now you've got Denny Hamlin sitting out. I'll talk about more about safety here in a little bit, but it's just so frustrating. Denny Hamlin's got to sit out because of injuries. This car is much more stiff. It doesn't have as much give, and drivers are generally suffering more injuries. And I know that Denny Hamlin's probably going to want to focus on Cup, but still, if he gets another injury like an Xfinity Series race, some soreness and stuff, he could sit out the rest of the season. And he probably would sit out the Cup race right now if he didn't have the Cup race the next day for the Southern 500. And also, it's going to be a long and grueling race anyways for the Cup race as well, with it being a 500-mile race. It isn't the longest in miles, but it seems like 500 miles at Darlington is longer than 600 miles in the Coke 600 from time to time for drivers. And it's a much more tough race, and he puts a lot of strain on you. And I think Denny Hamlin doesn't want to have to get any more accidents and wrecks. Now, hopefully Denny Hamlin in the Southern 500 doesn't end up getting involved in a wreck. But this is something that we'll talk about in just a second here. But in my honest opinion, it's a shame that Denny Hamlin can't race Xfinity because he's in a lot of pain, and I don't want his health and safety to be in jeopardy. So I think it's a great call. If he's not feeling good enough to get out on the track, I think it makes a lot of sense for him to basically focus on his health, and hopefully he'll be ready to go for the Southern 500 and can be as competitive. I'm worried he may not be as competitive because of the injuries and the wrecks he's been in, but Denny Hamlin basically will be sitting out. It's a shame, but generally it is what it is, and hopefully Denny Hamlin can be ready to go, can be healthy, and can be ready to go to get behind the wheel of the NASCAR Cup Series car and can do really well. Hopefully things go well for Denny Hamlin. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the first of three major stories in today's episode. Speaking of which, what we talked about a second ago, we're going to talk about the next-gen car safety. Now, we already talked about the next-gen car earlier in today's episode, and basically earlier this week. But the next-gen car has been barely well known. It's been getting more and more progressively documented from drivers and fans that the next-gen car is not as safe as the previous cars. This car does not have as much give, and this car is a lot more rigid and a lot more stiff. So the drivers are suffering more and more injuries and basically suffering more of the hit than they used to. Like in a flip upside down in a really, really hard wreck, the drivers, they're not feeling anything really. But in like really simple wrecks, like ordinary wrecks you see in a race where a driver backs into the outside wall, we've seen more and more drivers basically complaining. We've had a lot of drivers come out. Christopher Bell talking about this past week with Jonathan Field from the Racing Expert, basically talking about the NASCAR needs to work on the safety. Bubba Wallace basically was complaining and was really angry on the radio about safety of his car, saying that this car is terrible on the rear. Denny Hamlin really upset and missing an Xfinity Series race. We got drivers sitting out right now, and even Kevin Harvick has been publicly talking about it. Well, today, in the playoff media day, multiple drivers were talking about the next-gen safety of this car. Let's first start with Joey Logano. Joey Logano basically said that the safety is a major, major concern, and NASCAR absolutely needs to work on getting the safety of this car and basically figuring something out. Denny Hamlin basically said that these hits, the drivers are taking bigger hits than they have in the past, and said that NASCAR probably should figure out a way to fix the hits right there and said the hits are harder. He says he's feeling better each and every day, but he's still, even to this day on Thursday, is still feeling soreness currently at the moment, and he may not be fully 100% out of being sore until maybe tomorrow or the next couple of days, and that's why he's probably sitting out of the NASCAR Xfinity Series race. But the most damning quotes to me that really came out were from Kevin Harvick. Kevin Harvick has been, like I said, a driver that's been a big proponent of the safety. But Kevin Harvick basically was talking about how basically the hits they're suffering, like the ordinary hits, like the ones that are 15 Gs, he said that they feel like they're 50 Gs. So they're almost 3 times the excess of the hit that they used to be. And he says that even some of the smaller hits are basically feeling like a lot more harder of the hits. And he basically said it's because of the car being really, really rigid. The drivers are more outspoken, and basically Kevin Harvick talked about what Joe Logano said, and basically Kevin Harvick basically said NASCAR needs to make this the #1 priority. And I'm 100% with Kevin Harvick on that. Concussions and injuries are, especially concussions, can end up being life-threatening injuries and can become major, major issues down the road. We talk about CT in football. We talk about those kind of things. And drivers are been more, like I said, the reason drivers become more progressively active about this, and it's not just the older drivers like Kevin Harvick, Denny Hamlin. You've got some of the younger drivers. Christopher Bell, Bubba Wallace. Joe Logano's still kind of a younger driver. Even Austin Dillon. We've had drivers like Chase Elliott, I think, talk about this. And NASCAR needs to find a way to get this figured out. We cannot have NASCAR Cup Series careers end really early. We cannot sacrifice having guys' Cup careers end early, and we cannot put these guys in jeopardy. Because what's going to happen is, I don't think a driver is going to die, but what if that happens? That is a very big possibility. I mean, it could happen where we have more drivers have concussions. Denny Hamlin's a lot older of a driver, and he basically said he's in a lot of pain, and they say it goes directly to the head. NASCAR 100% needs to address this issue as soon as possible. I don't care what it takes. But one thing I've heard, maybe they could update the safer barriers, which is one thing I know that's probably been in the conversations, is to update the safer barriers so it gives a little more give, which I could see them basically doing that. I think that would help a little bit. But NASCAR needs to either add some more crush zones. They need to figure out something because these cars are way too stiff. Don't get me wrong. The next-gen car has provided the best racing we've seen since probably the Gen 4 era. However, I would rather care about the safety than basically the racing. The safety should be more important of the drivers, should be way, way more important than the racing we see on track. Because the driver safety to me is more important. And the people are going to say, well, NASCAR is inherently dangerous. Yes, NASCAR and racing is generally dangerous, but we've got drivers getting injured more and more frequently than the past 2 generations of the cars combined. Even Kevin Harvick said that basically he feels like these hits are like Gen 4 hits. And that's not a great thing to hear, is that we're seeing more of this talking point frequently. NASCAR needs to get on this as soon as possible and needs to get this issue resolved as quickly as possible. I don't want it done after the season. I want it done now. They need to get this resolved ASAP. As quick as they can. They need to get this issue resolved ASAP because this is a pretty big issue. We got drivers sitting out of races. We got drivers sitting out for the rest of the season, could basically have their career enders, and concussions can end careers. Carl Edwards ended his career early. Dale Jr. ended his career early because of concussions and safety issues. NASCAR needs to 100% make this a big priority, and I hope the NASCAR's already talking about it. I have a feeling they're already talking about it, but they need to make this 100% a major, major, major priority. NASCAR, get on it and start fixing this, in my opinion. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the first of 2 major stories of today's episode, as we're going to talk about 23XI Racing. 23XI Racing yesterday made some pretty major announcements. Because Kurt Busch is out for the rest of the season, he of course will most likely out for the rest of the season, he won't be in the 45 car. The 45 car, though, is in the Owners' Championship. So 23XI Racing has done something that has not been done in a very, very long time, at least with a pretty top-tier team. Bubba Wallace is going to be moving away from the 23 car and moving over to the 45 car. Ty Gibbs will be moving away from the 45 car and moving over to the 23 car. Here's what needs to be addressed. The only things that are changing is that the driver of the 45 is in the 23. Basically, the only things that are changing is the sponsors and the driver are basically switching to the different numbers. The only thing basically is changing is the number. But I want to say why they are doing this. Well, like I said, the 45 car is in the Owners' Championship because Kurt Busch won at Kansas. I think this move generally is really a genius move because, like I said, you've got basically your flagship driver, the driver that brings sponsorship funding from DoorDash and other companies like McDonald's. They would not be with Bubba Wallace, basically not be with 23XI if Bubba Wallace wasn't there. They wouldn't be with 23XI. 23XI Racing Michael Jordan would basically not be around right now without Bubba Wallace being there. And let's also not forget that Bubba Wallace has been extremely competitive over the last 6 or 7 weeks, last 8 weeks. Bubba Wallace in the last 8 races has only had 1 finish outside the top 15, and that finish came at Watkins Glen. He was actually kind of running near the top 15 and top 20 in that race as well, especially early, before he had some mechanical problems. Before that, 7 straight top 15 finishes, and also picked up a pretty big, wildly contract extension for multiple seasons, at least probably a 2 or 3 year extension to stay on a long-term basis. It makes a lot of sense. And this no disrespect Ty Gibbs, but Ty Gibbs is not the flagship driver of the team. Bubba Wallace is. So, and one thing to note is that I think it was the first time, at least for the Cup Series, at least for kind of decent teams or big teams, since I think Michael Waltrip basically did back in 2008, because David Rudham, he drove the 00 car for the first 5 races, if I'm not mistaken, the 00 before Dale Jarrett retired after the 5th race, and then he moved over to the 44, and then Michael McDowell went over to the 00 car. I think this is a really good move. I don't know why no one like myself really thought about this before. When I saw this, I was really, really shocked. But then again, when I think about it more and more, I think it makes a ton of sense and makes a major, major amount of sense. And I think what 2311 Racing is doing here, I think is a great move for the team, is getting out sponsors and funding. Now, one thing we need to talk about is if Kurt Busch is to come back. Denny Hamlin did say today that if Kurt Busch does return, he'll be in the 23 car, and then it basically will be a swift swap back in 2023 because Bubba will be back in the 23 car. One other big thing to note, though, I think Kurt Busch is out for the rest of the season. I think the fact that they're making this switch right now, especially Kurt Busch being out for as long as he's been, I really think that Kurt Busch will be out for the rest of the season. If he does come back, I think he'll make probably like 1 or 2 starts here at the end because, again, concussion is something that takes time. It basically, concussions are not like any other injury. With arm injuries, with basically leg injuries, they can recover and basically you can basically come back from a broken bone. The head is a very important, essential thing, and we know that Kurt Busch has been in the control center for 2311. He's been out of games like basically baseball games and soccer games. He's been out at those things. But I'm not sure if Kurt Busch is even going to come back this year. I feel like at this point, Kurt Busch is more than likely out for the remainder of the season. And it's a shame because Kurt Busch, up to this point for the injury at Pocono, he basically had been having a really solid year and was going to for sure make the playoffs on the owner's points side of things. It is very, very disappointing nonetheless that this had to happen, but I think this is generally a really, really good move for the team. It makes a lot of sense. And in my honest opinion, I think 2311 Racing has made a really, really great move. And honestly, this is a move that I didn't really think about long term, but I think it makes a lot of sense. And hopefully Kurt Busch can come back in the future, but I think at this point, Kurt Busch is probably going to be done for the rest of the season. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the final major story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Kyle Busch. Now, we've talked about Kyle Busch pretty much every single news video on the channel. I've probably made about 20 or 30 videos so far on Kyle Busch, because Kyle Busch right now is not signed for the 2023 season, and basically the biggest reason is because M&M's is going to be leaving at the conclusion of this season. They actually had a sponsor lineup with Oracle for Joe Gibbs Racing, but they dropped out about 3 or 4 weeks ago. They dropped out, and there's been a lot of indications saying that Kyle Busch will not be returning to Joe Gibbs Racing in 2023. Well, Kyle Busch today was speaking to media in regards to his 2023 plans for the basically the playoff media, and Kyle Busch says that he's getting really close to announcing his 2023 plans. He says he is hoping that he will basically have his announcements done within the next week or two. So within the next 7 to 10 days, he is hoping to basically have a deal signed with either returning to Joe Gibbs Racing or going to another organization in 2023. He also talked about today that there are multiple teams that basically are to be considered. I'll get into those teams in just a second, but there's 4 or 5 teams that right now seem like they're in the conversations for Kyle Busch. Of course, one of those being Joe Gibbs Racing, and there's other organizations to consider as well. Kyle Busch also speaking to media today, and I think Noah Lewis or Bob Pockers got the video on it, and Kyle Busch talked about his personality. He's kind of joking in the video as well, saying like kind of numbers have been brought up, like in the silly season, like the 10, 16%, you got like 32%, 29%. He's been kind of joking, even 3% has been brought up as well. Also in Sirius and NASCAR Radio today, noted by Daniel McFadden today, Kyle Busch said that basically with KBM, he said they had a deal done for something for yesterday, but it seems like things have changed with Kyle Busch Motorsports. Now, why is it taking so long for Kyle Busch to be signed for next year? Why is it taking this long? Well, one, they've been searching for a sponsor and been searching for funding. Number 2, they got to think about his son, Brexton. Brexton Busch is going to be, I think, 8 years old next year. I think he's 7 years old currently at the moment. So Brexton is getting a little bit older. And Kyle Busch has said that he wants to run next 7, 8 years. Wherever he goes, he wants to be committed there long term. Now, let's talk about all the teams that are in the running that could be in potential running for Kyle Busch. I think we've narrowed it down right now to 4 teams. There could be a 5th mysterious team, but I think we've narrowed it down to 4 teams. SHR, I think, is a team that's off the conversations with Eric Almirola signing a multi-year contract extension. And then, of course, Cole Custer likely coming back. Unless, like, Kevin Harvick retires a year early, we're probably not going to see Kyle Busch at Stewart Haas Racing next year unless Cole Custer is brought back down to the Xfinity Series. So the 4 teams that are really currently in the running right now are Joe Gibbs Racing for him to return, 2311 Racing staying in the Toyota camp, and then 2 Chevy teams, that being Richard Childress Racing and Kaulig Racing. Let's begin with Joe Gibbs Racing, the likelihood of Kyle Busch returning. I'm going to give this one about a 3 out of 10. I don't think Kyle Busch more than likely is going to return to Joe Gibbs Racing next year. And a big reason I don't think he's returning to Joe Gibbs Racing next year is because of the fact that they don't have a big sponsor for him. And I think if he's going to return to 18, they're going to need a major sponsor. I know Toyota wants to keep him in that 18 car, but you also have another driver named Ty Gibbs who's been doing really good in the Cup Series in the 6 races he's ran. He's gotten a top 10 with the team so far this year, and Ty Gibbs has been like around a top 15, top 20 driver. For a driver who doesn't have a lot of experience, that has been really good. And, of course, Ty Gibbs being the grandson of Joe Gibbs, he's probably end up being the 18 car next year. The next team we talk about is 2311 Racing. Now, 2311 Racing, currently in the moment, we don't really know what's going on with Kurt Busch. We also know that Tyler Reddick could also be a very possible option to go and leave Richard Childress Racing a year early. We know that Richard has not been very happy, so it's possible if Kurt Busch does not return that he could go back there. We know Bubba Wallace has signed a multi-year extension. We do also know that 2311 Racing right now, they're not planning to expand to 3-car operation. That had been one thing that's kind of been brought up and addressed, but I think Austin Ganetsky in a recent report, basically an article that came out, said that 2311 Racing, as Steve Aletta said, that 2311 Racing is not planning to expand. This could be a possible option. I think this is probably a 5 out of 10, and the reason that this is a 5 out of 10 is it's really all going to come down to if Kurt Busch returns or not. We know that Kurt Busch, he wants to return in 2023, wants to run for one final season more than likely because he's talked about how next year he really wants to return. However, it's all going to depend on if Kurt Busch does return or not, and I'm not sure if that's going to happen. And I'm not sure if when it comes to sponsorship and stuff, would they be willing, because they do have funding and sponsorship at 2311 Racing, they'd be able to pay him. That's one thing that could happen, but Kyle Busch also be mad, but you would keep KBM and Toyota really happy. Now getting to the other 2 teams. Kaulig Racing and RCR. Richard Childress Racing has emerged as a potential favorite. This was a 2 out of 10 for me. This has gone up to a 6. I think this is a really possible option. Like I just mentioned a second ago with Richard Childress Racing. Richard Childress Racing with Tyler Reddick. Tyler Reddick, yes, he's been helping out the team a lot, and I know that Austin Hill and Tyler Reddick really are working together really well. But Richard does not want Tyler Reddick at Richard Childress anymore, and he wants Tyler Reddick gone already. And Richard needs a guy that's going to be committed long-term. If you bring Kyle Busch into Richard Childress Racing, he will succeed for the team. Now, do I think more than likely he goes there? There's a very good possibility, but Richard Childress Racing could be a potential option for him going into next year. That's a viable option. But I think the team that Kyle Busch most likely is going to end up driving for in 2023 is going to end up driving the 16 for Kaulig Racing. I think this is an 8 out of 10, and I think this deal is more than likely signed. He does say that he has to consider multiple offers, but I think that he is going to be driving the 16 for Kaulig Racing next year. Matt Kaulig said a few months, I think about a month or 2 ago, he has said that he's not sure if he's going to have a rotation car or a full-time car. I think Justin Haley is going to be back with the 31 team for sure next year. I think he's already confirmed he's back with the 31 team next season. But I think that they are going to be trying to get Kyle Busch, and they've been trying to court Kyle Busch for a while, and I think he's going to drive the 16. Matt Kaulig has a lot of funding and a lot of sponsorship with Leaf Filter. I think he's a part owner of the Leaf Filter company, so he would have sponsorship funding for Kyle Busch. Also, Kaulig Racing is looking for a veteran presence that wants to run full-time. This is no offense to AJ, but AJ doesn't want to run full-time right now, so he's not going to run full-time. Kyle Busch is someone that could really bring that experience to Kaulig Racing because they've shown that they've had potential. They really do want to go out and win races, and they've had potential. They've had some decent pace and speed. Kyle Busch get best out of equipment. Before Kyle Busch got to Joe Gibbs Racing in 2008, he wasn't doing fantastic. That car wasn't doing fantastic for the last few years. Kyle Busch goes there, does extremely well. It's also been documented that Chris Rice says they're close to announcing their plans, and they have said they want to have a truck series team. Who's got a truck series team and a driver with the truck team? Kyle Busch. And it's also rumored that GMS may shut their team down at the conclusion of the season, at least for the truck series side, to focus on the Cup Series side of things. So I really believe that Kyle Busch is going to go to Kaulig Racing at this point. We'll wait to see what happens, but I think he's going to end up at Kaulig. I think you have Rich Schultz number 2, 2311 Racing number 3, and I think Joe Gibbs is last on the totem pole. A few months ago, I would have thought he'd be returning to Joe Gibbs Racing, but I think Kaulig Racing, they can have him for the long-term future. They've got a great team that's on the uprising, and I think they need someone who can stay long-term. I think Kyle Busch is going to be that guy, and I think he's going to go to Kaulig Racing in 2023. So, that's going to be it for today's long NASCAR and Motorsports video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notification on to be notified when a video does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and support me on Patreon as well. Links description below over that and comment with your thoughts on today's video. Where do you think Kyle Busch is going to be at 2023? Do you think he's going to be a Kaulig? Do you think he's going to be back at Joe Gibbs Racing? Let me know in the comments below. And what are your thoughts about Bubba Wallace driving a 45 car for the remainder of the season? Do you think 2311 made a great decision or not? I think they did, but let me know what your thoughts are on. I'm not sure if we're going to have a video tomorrow on the channel just because I'm going to be doing a lot of stuff tomorrow on my personal life. I'm not really sure if I will. If I do, maybe I'll have it late at night. We'll just have to wait and see. If something breaks, I might do a video then. Sunday, of course, we got Southern 500 weekend. We got a lot of racing this weekend. Monday, not sure what's going to be coming out yet. You'll have to wait and see. We'll have probably something out. Just keep your eyes on my channel. So anyway, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's video, and I'll see you guys next time for some more great, awesome NASCAR and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.